What was even crazier is Jon Jones came out and was like, I'm in negotiations right now for the White House fight.
I'm in negotiations with the UFC about this White House thing as well.
After I had already sent a text to his lawyer saying, never gonna happen ever.
All right, Sunday morning, leaving Las Vegas. Freedom 250 was announced last night at the White House, going down in June. So we're going to talk about this. I honestly thought we were going to see Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira, more than likely in the main event. Of course, that's not the main event. That is Justin Gaethje taking on Ilia Topuria for the undisputed lightweight championship of the world, which is a great fight, which is the fight that should happen because obviously meritocracy, and they've got an interim champion. There was people saying that maybe Charles Oliveira or Max Holloway could have gazumped Justin, maybe if they had an insane performance. I'll say this, Charles Oliveira had an insane performance.
Jon Jones was supposed to headline the biggest UFC event in history at the White House. Instead, he's completely ghosted from Freedom 250, and what Dana White just revealed about why he's missing tells you everything you need to know about how the UFC really operates behind closed doors.
Helped Max Holloway, didn't put him to sleep per se, but certainly a TKO, so that wouldn't have made sense anyway. Now, I did think Jon Jones, the greatest of all time according to a lot of people, and yeah, probably is, obviously many asterisks to his name. I thought he'd be fighting Alex Pereira, because Alex Pereira vacated the belt. Yuri versus Carlos Ulberg is going down in Miami. That's a great fight. I'm very happy for Yuri Prochazka and for Carlos Ulberg.
This was supposed to be Jones' crowning moment. Freedom 250 at the White House, the most politically significant UFC card ever assembled, with mainstream media attention that money can't buy. But instead of the heavyweight champion everyone expected to see, we've got Ilia Topuria fighting for a different belt entirely. And here's what nobody's talking about, but everyone should be paying attention to. When Dana White puts together a card of this magnitude, under this kind of scrutiny, with politicians and celebrities watching, every single decision gets made for a reason. Jones' absence isn't some scheduling conflict or bad timing. This is a calculated business move that speaks volumes about where the UFC sees their former golden boy right now.
Now, there's an interim title going down in the heavyweight division. Tom Aspinall, obviously, he's been on the sidelines for quite some time now because of Cyril Gane, because of the double eye poke that he enjoyed and suffered at in UFC 321 in Abu Dhabi, right? He's on the sidelines, he's coming back, he just signed with Eddie Hearn. I gave my thoughts on that the other day. Wasn't being critical of Tom in any way. I wish him nothing but the best, and I want to see Tom Aspinall back in the cage doing what he does best. But I can't help but think that Eddie Hearn's kind of playing games here, but we'll see. I talked about that before. The reality of the situation is, though, he's not ready to come back just yet, so they've done an interim title with Alex Pereira versus Cyril Gane.
Think about what this really means for a second. The UFC is literally saying they'd rather move forward without their heavyweight champion than risk having him on the biggest stage they've ever had. That's not just brutal, that's a complete dismantling of everything Jones thought he represented to this company. For over a decade, Jones was untouchable. He was the guy Dana would bend over backwards to protect, to promote, to keep happy. But now they're actively planning their most important event in company history, as if he doesn't even exist. And the replacement they chose tells you exactly what they think about Jones' current value as a draw and as a reliable performer.
People might think, well, that's weird. I've gone the wrong way. That's weird. He pokes Tom Aspinall and then gets rewarded with an interim title shot. Well, first of all, accidents do happen. It wasn't intentional. I'll give Cyril the benefit of the doubt on that. People get poked in the eye all the time. I don't think they're intentional, but regardless, he is fighting for the interim strap against Alex Pereira, which is very impressive because Alex Pereira will be the first person to ever compete for 3 different titles, 3 different weight classes, which is just, it is insane. I mean, the success that this guy's had.
But here's where it gets absolutely wild. The UFC didn't just replace Jones with anybody. They booked Alex Pereira versus Cyril Gane for an interim heavyweight title, and they did it specifically for the White House card. Think about the optics of that decision. Pereira, who's never even fought at heavyweight before, gets fast-tracked into a title shot on the most prestigious card ever, while the actual champion sits at home. That's not just moving on from Jones, that's completely rewriting the heavyweight division's hierarchy without him. Dana White is essentially telling the world that Pereira's star power and reliability are worth more than Jones' championship status. And honestly, the numbers probably back that up.
That's Jon Jones would have just taken down Alex Pereira. Pardon me, it's early. I've only had a few hours sleep. But yeah, Jones would have probably taken down Pereira. Wouldn't have been easy, right? Magomed Ankalaev has tried to do that. Other people have tried to do that. Jan Blachowicz tried to do that. But this is Jon Jones we're talking about. Look at what he did to Cyril Gane. And remember, in the first round, even Tom Aspinall couldn't take down Cyril Gane, but Jon could, right? So that's just something to think about. Jon would have probably taken Pereira down and finished him by a ground and pound, you know, just choked him out, whatever. And it could have been a quick performance.
Now listen to this part, because this is where the business side gets really interesting. When you're putting on an event at the White House, you can't afford any controversies, any uncertainties, or any drama that might overshadow the spectacle. Jones brings baggage. He always has. But more importantly right now, he brings unpredictability. Contract negotiations that drag on for months, activity levels that frustrate fans, and a fighting style that, let's be honest, doesn't always deliver the fireworks casual viewers want to see. Pereira versus Gane? That's a guaranteed striking war with knockout potential in every exchange. For mainstream audiences who might be watching UFC for the first time, that's appointment television. Jones grinding out another wrestling-heavy decision. That's a channel changer.
The man is going to shoot a double leg takedown. It's going to be a kickboxing match in 4-ounce gloves. And then when you look at the matchup, on one side you've got Pereira, who's got insane power, who was the middleweight champion, the light heavyweight champion, and now potentially heavyweight champion. Again, legendary stuff. The power will travel. He had knockout power at 185, 205 he will, and at heavyweight he's still going to pack the same amount of punch. Granted, you're fighting bigger people, you're striking bigger people with bigger necks and bigger jaws and just generally heavy, so they'll be able to absorb the blows better, but he's still going to crack a punch, man. Simple.
And get this, the UFC isn't just moving on from Jones, they're actively creating new stars to replace him. Pereira's pursuit of a 3-division championship is the kind of historic achievement that writes itself into sports history. If he pulls it off at the White House, he becomes the story of the night, the story of the year, maybe the story of the decade. Meanwhile, Jones is at home watching someone else make history in his division. That has to be eating him alive, knowing that the moment he's been building toward his entire career is happening without him, with someone else positioned to achieve something even he never accomplished.
He's got the punching power. He's not quite as smooth or quite as slick as Cyril Gane, although I'm not saying he's not slick, I'm not saying he's not smooth, I'm not saying he hasn't got great combinations, because he does. He's a brilliant world-class kickboxer. But on the other side, you've got Cyril Gane, who's very, very light on the feet, very bouncy, very floaty. He kind of glides around the octagon and extremely fast for the heavyweight division. I don't think either guy is going to go for a takedown. If it does go down to the ground, it'll be after one of them gets.
Here's the kicker though, and this is where Dana's strategy gets really calculated. By publicly discussing Jones' hip surgery and arthritis issues, Dana's not just explaining his absence, he's controlling the narrative around it. He's painting a picture of a champion whose body is breaking down, whose best days are behind him, whose future is uncertain at best. It's not a personal attack, it's almost worse than that. It's a professional obituary. Dana's essentially telling the MMA world that Jones is damaged goods, that his health makes him unreliable for major event planning, that the company can't build around someone who might not be able to perform when it matters most.
Shut up with the announcements, please. I'm trying to do a YouTube video like an absolute bellend walking through an airport and everyone's looking.
But wait, it gets worse. Sources close to the situation are saying Jones was playing games during contract negotiations after the Curtis Blades booking fell through. Playing games with Dana White in 2024. That's like bringing a knife to a gunfight, except the other guy has a nuclear weapon and a proven track record of destroying fighters who try to leverage him. Dana's spent decades building a reputation around one simple principle: nobody is bigger than the UFC. Not Chuck Liddell, not Tito Ortiz, not even Conor McGregor when push came to shove. And certainly not Jon Jones, regardless of his legacy or his championship status.
I don't think either guy is going to go for a takedown. If it does go down to the ground, it'll be after one of them gets knocked.
The most telling part of this whole situation is how stacked the Freedom 250 card is without Jones anywhere near it. Steve Garcia versus Diego Lopez, Benny Ildarius versus Kyle Dawkhouse, rising stars and proven finishers delivering must-see fights from top to bottom. Dana's basically proving that the UFC machine is so deep, so talented, so well-oiled that they can put together a historic card without their heavyweight champion and nobody really misses him. That's devastating for Jones' negotiating position, devastating for his legacy, and devastating for any illusion he might have had about being irreplaceable in this company.
Shut up with the announcements, please. I'm trying to do a YouTube video like an absolute bellend walking through an airport and everyone's looking. It's full of UFC fans because UFC 326 was last night. Anyway, yeah, if you go to the ground, it's because one of them knocks each other down and then they go to finish it. So this is going to be a fantastic striking affair in the co-main event at the White House.
And honestly, this might be exactly what Dana wanted all along. Think about it from a business perspective. Jones is expensive, he's unpredictable, he comes with decades of baggage, and his fighting style doesn't always deliver the excitement that brings in new fans. Pereira is younger, more active, more exciting, and represents the future of the sport rather than its complicated past. By positioning Pereira as the star of their biggest event ever, Dana's not just replacing Jones, he's upgrading from him. He's showing investors, media partners, and fans that the UFC's future is brighter without their former golden boy holding them back.
The script has been flipped completely on its head. Remember, he was the interim champion and couldn't get a shot at the undisputed. Hello, she's looking at me with a smirk. Couldn't get a shot at the undisputed with Jon Jones because he wasn't playing games. He had a fight booked against Stipe Miocic, but then Jones certainly was playing games. You know, after the Curtis Blades matchup, we didn't know what he was doing. Now, we don't know what's happening with Tom, right? I assume their eyes are going to be good to go very, very soon, right? Otherwise, Eddie Hearn isn't going to sign a fighter that can't fight.
So here's what we're really looking at. This isn't just about one event or one fight. This is Dana White systematically dismantling Jon Jones' position in the company, his leverage in negotiations, and his relevance in the heavyweight division. It's a masterclass in corporate warfare, executed with surgical precision and plausible deniability. Jones thought he could play hardball with the UFC, thought his legacy and championship status made him untouchable. Instead, he's about to watch someone else make history in his division, while he sits at home wondering how it all went so wrong so fast.
So this time it'll be for an interim belt versus an undisputed belt, which makes the fight even bigger. As I said on another video the other day, it all depends on these contractual negotiations. Eddie Hearn came out and was kind of shitting on Tom's contract and saying that he doesn't get paid what he should get paid if Eddie's going to try and change that contract. And you know, that is what a good manager does, to be fair, and you want the best management team on your side. You certainly don't want an amateur, you don't want a chump, you don't want someone that doesn't know what they're doing. But if he tries to push the goalposts far too far, UFC aren't going to agree to that, and there might be some kind of...
The craziest part is that Jones probably saw this coming but couldn't stop it. Once you start playing games with Dana White, once you become more trouble than you're worth, the machine starts moving without you. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. The UFC has moved on, the fans have moved on, and your replacement is already being positioned as the future of the division you thought you controlled. That's not just business, that's brutal efficiency at its finest.
Knocked out Jean Silva, and what else did he do? Oh, I mean, listen, he's just must-see TV. And then on the other side, Steve Garcia hasn't got the same kind of brand value as Diego Lopez, but holy shit, man, he's on, I think, an 8-fight win streak, and they're all stoppages, most of them in the first round. I think one of them got to the second round. And you gotta love Steve Garcia. He's a nasty guy. So that'll be the first fight on the card. I didn't see this one coming. Bo Nickel versus Kyle Dawkhouse. I didn't expect that one, but it'll be a good fight. Dawkhouse, he's on a 2-fight win streak. Bo Nickel, of course.
So there you have it. Jon Jones went from being the face of the heavyweight division to being completely irrelevant to the UFC's biggest event ever. And it happened because he forgot the most important rule in this business. Dana White doesn't need you. You need Dana White. This Freedom 250 card is going to be incredible. Pereira might make history, and Jones is going to watch it all happen from his couch knowing he played himself out of the biggest moment in UFC history. The question now is whether he can swallow his pride, take whatever deal the UFC offers, and try to salvage what's left of his career, or if this is how one of the greatest fighters of all time fades into irrelevance. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Smash that like button if this breakdown opened your eyes to what's really happening behind the scenes, and subscribe because the UFC's power plays are just getting started. I'll see you in the next one.
Hey, right, obviously there was talk of Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler competing on that card. Dana said, nah, we ain't interested in that anymore. But it turns out it was the Conor McGregor side. Now, Conor came out and he was doing an interview with Chael Sonnen, and he brought up some good points. He said, listen, it's going to be a sellout with my name involved. Regardless, it's going to do blockbuster numbers.
You know, like a double sale thing. That's the White House was going to hit no matter what.
And he's absolutely right. When Conor comes back, it's going to be insane, right? And that's just the facts of the matter. So they don't need to put him on the White House card. And he said, they don't put me on 300. They'll put me on 301 or 200. They'll put me on 201.
But hold up, because this story gets even more insane when you look at what's happening with the other fighters on this card. While Jones is sitting at home, literally every other big name in the UFC is fighting to get on Freedom 250. Fighters are taking short-notice fights, cutting weight on brutal timelines, and accepting less money just to be part of this historic moment. That tells you everything about how the industry views this event versus how Jones apparently valued his participation. When Conor McGregor is publicly begging for a spot on the card and you're nowhere to be found, you've officially lost the plot.
We think Jon Jones actually is retired. That'll be it. We'll never see him again. If it is, it's kind of an unceremonious way to go out. I remember when I retired, I wasn't happy with the way that it ended because I wanted to retire in the octagon after a fight, win or lose. I wanted to thank the crowd. That's why I was going to take one more fight. I was actually in negotiations to fight Rashad Evans at the O2 Arena in London because I've romanticised this idea of thanking the crowd and all this type of stuff and putting the gloves down and going through that whole thing. And my manager, Audie Atara, was like, Mike, you're romanticising this in your mind for this big moment, but what you're doing is you're putting your vision.
And here's something that's going to blow your mind. Dana White didn't just accidentally create this situation. He orchestrated it. Think about the timeline here. The Curtis Blades fight gets booked, Jones starts making demands, the fight falls through, and suddenly Pereira versus Gain materializes out of nowhere for an interim title. That doesn't happen by accident. That's Dana having a backup plan for his backup plan, knowing exactly how Jones was going to react, and being 3 steps ahead of him the entire time. This is chess while Jones was playing checkers, and now he's watching the board get cleared without him.
Also ashamed that apparently he needs hip surgery. He was talking about, being riddled with arthritis, got caught on camera. Dana mentioned that again at the press conference.
Is it fair to say then Jon Jones is retired and this is the end of his time?
Yes.
Said he might need a hip replacement. So I hope that all works out for him. And if it is the end of a legendary career, fair play, man. Talk about knocking it out of the park, making an insane amount of money and building a life for yourself. Because that's really what you can do. A lot of people talk shit about the UFC and they say me being a company man. Look at me, for crying out loud. One day you could be me, wandering around an airport with a camera in your hand, looking like an
But wait, there's another layer to this that nobody's talking about. The White House venue isn't just about prestige. It's about legitimizing MMA as America's sport. This event is supposed to represent the absolute best the UFC has to offer, the fighters who embody what American combat sports should look like on the world stage. By excluding Jones, Dana's making a statement about what kind of representatives he wants for the sport. Clean athletes, reliable performers, guys who show up when it matters most. Jones' absence sends a message that past accomplishments don't matter if you can't be counted on when the lights are brightest. The psychological warfare here is absolutely next level. Dana's not just benching Jones, he's making him watch someone else potentially achieve something greater than anything he ever accomplished. If Pereira wins that interim heavyweight title, he becomes the first fighter in UFC history to hold titles in 3 different weight classes. That's not just making history, that's rewriting the record books in a way that makes Jones' 2-division dreams look small by comparison. Imagine being Jones right now, watching someone else chase the kind of legacy-defining moment you've been talking about for years. And let's be real about something else. The UFC's roster is deeper now than it's ever been. They don't need to build entire cards around one superstar anymore because they've got legitimate killers from top to bottom. Steve Garcia's knockout power, Diego Lopez's finishing ability, Beneil Darius's veteran savvy, Kyle Dawkhouse's submission skills. Every fight on this card has the potential to steal the show, which means Jones isn't just missing out on main event money. He's missing out on being part of a card that could produce multiple performance bonuses and career-making moments. Here's where it gets really wild, though. Sources inside the UFC are saying that Dana's been planning for a post-Jones heavyweight division for months, not just as a contingency plan, but as an active strategy. The signing of certain heavyweights, the positioning of Pereira for this division jump, the way they've been promoting other contenders. This wasn't a reaction to Jones playing games with contracts. This was a systematic phase-out that Jones apparently never saw coming. He thought he was negotiating from a position of strength, while Dana was already building his replacement. The financial implications of this are staggering when you really break them down. Freedom 250 is projected to be the highest-grossing UFC event in history, not just from pay-per-view buys, but from merchandise, sponsorships, and the kind of mainstream media attention that translates to massive future deals. Jones is missing out on what could have been the biggest payday of his career, but more importantly, he's missing out on the kind of cultural moment that creates lasting value. Fighters who perform well at this event aren't just getting paid for one night. They're setting themselves up for years of increased earning potential. And check this out. The international implications of this card are massive. Having the UFC at the White House sends a message to the global sports community about MMA's place in American culture. The fighters on this card become ambassadors for the sport, guys who can point to performing at the White House as validation of their elite status. Jones could have been the face of that moment, the champion who represented American MMA on its biggest stage. Instead, he's going to watch other fighters claim that distinction, while he explains to people why he wasn't there. But here's the most brutal part of Dana's strategy. By publicly discussing Jones' health issues and contract demands, he's not just explaining the current situation, he's poisoning the well for future negotiations. Every time Jones tries to make demands going forward, people are going to remember that he was the guy who priced himself out of the White House event. Every time he talks about his legacy, people are going to ask why he wasn't there when it mattered most. Dana's not just winning this battle, he's making sure Jones can never really recover from losing it. The ripple effects of this decision are going to be felt for years. Young fighters coming up are going to look at what happened to Jones and understand that nobody is untouchable in this business. Veterans are going to think twice before playing hardball with the UFC brass. And fans are going to remember that when the biggest moment in UFC history happened, Jon Jones wasn't there. That's not just missing a payday, that's missing a chance to cement your legacy at the highest possible level. What makes this even more devastating is that Jones probably knows he messed up, but it's too late to fix it. You can't unmiss the White House card. You can't go back and accept the deal you should have taken. You can't reclaim the moment you let slip away because you thought you had more leverage than you actually did. That's the kind of mistake that haunts fighters for the rest of their careers, the what-if moment that defines everything that comes after. And Dana's not done yet. The success of Freedom 250 is going to prove that the UFC can create massive moments without Jones, which completely undermines any future negotiating position he might think he has. If Pereira vs. Gain delivers the kind of explosive action that gets replayed on sports shows for weeks, if the event breaks pay-per-view records, if the mainstream media coverage exceeds expectations, then Dana has all the ammunition he needs to lowball Jones on whatever comes next. The most insane part is that this could have been Jones' redemption story. After years of controversies and setbacks, performing at the White House could have been his moment to show that he'd evolved, that he was ready to be the face of the sport in its most prestigious setting. Instead, his absence becomes part of the story, a reminder that some fighters never learn how to get out of their own way. That's not just a missed opportunity, that's a legacy-defining failure that's going to follow him forever. So when you watch Freedom 250 and see Pereira potentially making history, when you see other fighters having career-defining moments on the biggest stage in UFC history, remember that Jon Jones was invited to this party and chose not to show up. That's not just bad business, that's the kind of decision that separates legends from cautionary tales. And right now, Jones is looking a lot more like the latter than the former.